I didn't go into those woods looking for trouble. I just wanted some peace, a break from the noise of everyday life. But deep in the trees, I found something, watching, waiting. And when I tried to leave, the forest wouldn't let me. This is what really happened. Before we dive into this terrifying story, make sure you're somewhere safe. Turn off the lights, grab your headphones, and if you dare, hit that subscribe button, because this is only the beginning. I guess it all started with that feeling. You know the one, like the walls are closing in, even when there's nothing physically wrong. Just a slow, constant weight pressing down on your chest. Life had been coming at me fast. Work, relationships, bills, that constant buzzing pressure to always be on. Smiling when you don't want to, pretending like everything's fine when really, inside, everything feels like it's unraveling. I needed air, real air. I needed silence that didn't come from noise-canceling headphones or midnight drives with the windows down. I wanted to feel something raw, something untouched, something that would remind me I was still alive. That's when the idea hit me. I'd go off-grid, just for a few days. No emails, no notifications, no people. Just me, the trees, and a few nights under the stars. A mental reset. That's all I was after. I started looking up places, quiet trails, hidden campgrounds, anything that felt disconnected. Most places looked too curated, too well-worn by weekend hikers with GoPros. But then I stumbled across this post buried in an old hiking blog. The guy wrote like he was warning more than recommending. He said, "There's a place west of Breckenridge Hollow. Not on the map, not officially. Locals call it Deadwood Trail, but nobody really talks about it. If you go, don't stray too deep. The forest doesn't like visitors." That should have been enough to make me scroll past. But it wasn't. Something about it pulled at me. Maybe it was the way he described the silence out there, not just quiet, but the kind of silence that felt sacred. Or maybe it was just the name, Deadwood Trail. Creepy, yeah, but weirdly poetic too. I looked into it, found next to nothing. A few blurry photos, a pin someone dropped on an ancient forum thread. No real information, no reviews, no tourist traps. It was perfect. So I packed light. Just the basics: a tent, food, water, journal, a knife, flashlight, and my phone. Turned off. I didn't tell many people where I was going. Just left a note with my roommate in case something came up. At the time, I didn't think twice about it. It wasn't supposed to be some dramatic journey. I wasn't running from anything. Or at least that's what I told myself. I was just tired. And the idea of being somewhere untouched, somewhere forgotten by the world, felt like exactly what I needed. I left on a Friday morning. The sky was grey, but not in a threatening way, more like it was unsure of itself. I drove for hours, further than I thought I'd need to. Paved roads turned to gravel, then gravel turned to dirt. By the time I reached the edge of the woods, I'd already lost cell signal. That should have bothered me, but it didn't. If anything, I felt relief, like I'd finally outrun the noise. But I didn't know then that the real noise was waiting for me, deeper in the trees. Awesome, glad you liked it. Let's move into the next part of the story, continuing in that same first-person, cinematic, and natural tone. Here's section 3. From the outline, I remember stepping into the woods and immediately noticing how still everything was. Not quiet, still. There were no bird song, no insects buzzing, not even the usual rustling of leaves in the wind. It was like the forest had pressed pause the moment I arrived, but I shrugged it off. I told myself I was just not used to this kind of silence. City life conditions you to expect a constant hum in the background. Maybe this was just nature, unfiltered. The trail, if you could call it that, was barely more than a game path. Faint, overgrown, like it hadn't seen regular footsteps in years. I followed it deeper, and even though I was alone, I kept catching myself glancing over my shoulder. Not because I heard anything, just this weird tickle in my brain, like something was behind me, but just out of sight. Again, I told myself it was nothing, just nerves, first day jitters. By early afternoon, I found a small clearing and set up my tent. It was beautiful in that untouched, eerie way. The trees were tall and packed tightly, their trunks blackened with age or fire, couldn't tell which. As I hammered in the stakes, I noticed this one tree right at the edge of the clearing. It had a carving on it. Nothing fancy, just a rough shape. It looked like an eye, kind of. Not a normal one either. It had extra lines, like it was meant to show it was watching, or bleeding, or both. I stood there staring at it longer than I should have. My first thought was, great, some wannabe cult kid made this. But there was something about it that didn't feel like a joke. The bark around it looked older than the rest, like it had been there for decades, weathered. I snapped a photo of it on instinct, just to document it. Later, when I checked my phone, the picture was just black. That night, I made a small fire and sat with my back to a log, letting the darkness settle in. Still no animals, no crackling of movement in the underbrush. Just stillness. I tried to enjoy it. Really, I did. But every now and then, I'd hear these faint sounds, like whispers carried by the wind. Not words, just the tone of speech, almost like someone was mumbling, just out of reach. I even stood up at one point and called out, "Hello," just in case. But there was no response. I didn't sleep much. The forest didn't feel peaceful at night. It felt like it was holding its breath, like it was waiting for something, or someone. The next morning, everything felt different. Not in a big, obvious way, just slightly off, like someone had nudged the world a few inches to the left while I was sleeping. I packed up camp and decided to explore a bit further, thinking I'd loop back before dark. I marked trees as I went, just to be safe. But after maybe an hour, the trail was gone. I mean gone. No footprints, no markers, no sign I had come from anywhere. I turned around, tried to retrace my steps, but every tree looked the same. Even the marks I left were missing. Like the forest had healed itself. The panic didn't hit right away. I kept moving, trying to stay calm, telling myself it was just disorientation. Happens all the time to hikers, right? Then I saw it. Nestled between a tangle of dead trees and thick moss, an old wooden cabin. No road, no path, just sitting there, like it had grown out of the ground. The windows were blacked out, and the roof sagged like it hadn't been touched in years. Still, something about it felt lived in, like it was expecting me. I should have walked the other way. Every part of me knew that, but my legs didn't listen. I stepped toward the door. It was already open. The door creaked as I stepped inside, but it wasn't the kind of dramatic horror movie creak. It was slower, lower, like the cabin was sighing after a long wait. The air inside was stale and thick. Dust floated in the light, coming through the cracks in the wood, but it wasn't abandoned the way I expected. The place wasn't clean, not by any means, but there were signs of life, or something close to it. A chair pulled away from the table, footprints in the dirt-caked floor. Some fresh, too fresh. There was no electricity, obviously, but I found a lantern hanging on the wall. It still had oil in it. I lit it, hands shaking just a bit, and its flicker threw long shadows across the cabin walls. That's when I saw them. Photos, dozens of them pinned haphazardly above an old dresser. Most were faded, water-damaged, but they were all portraits, faces, some looking directly into the lens, others caught mid-expression like they didn't know they were being photographed. Then I saw one that stopped me cold. It was me. Same jacket, same backpack. Standing just outside this very cabin, my face turned halfway toward the woods. I don't remember ever taking that photo, and I know for a fact no one else was with me. I felt something tighten in my chest, that cold, hollow kind of fear that doesn't come from noise or shadows. It comes from knowing something's deeply wrong, and you can't explain why. On the floor beside the bed, I noticed a torn, leather-bound journal. The pages were filled with frantic handwriting, scratched-out words, and drawings of that same eye symbol from the tree. The entries didn't make much sense, just fragments. It watches, I can't leave, not alone, and it wears my face now. I couldn't breathe. Something was wrong with the air, or maybe with me. The walls felt like they were pulsing slightly, breathing almost. I backed toward the door, and just as I reached it, the lantern flickered hard, then went out. I stood frozen in the dark. And then I heard something behind me, just the faintest breath, like someone leaning in, inches from my ear. I didn't turn around. I ran. I didn't stop running until my lungs burned and my legs buckled. The cabin was long behind me, or at least I thought it was. The trees were so thick, so endless, they all started to blend together. I turned in circles more times than I can count, trying to get my bearings. But no matter where I looked, nothing looked familiar. That's when I realized the worst part. The forest wasn't big. It was wrong. I should have been able to follow the sun, use it to orient myself. But the light was dim and directionless, like it was coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. The air felt heavier now, like it was pressing down on me. And even though I was alone, the forest didn't feel empty. It felt like it was watching me. I pulled out my phone, even though I knew I had no signal. I just needed the comfort of holding on to something real. But when I powered it on, the screen glitched, flickered, and then showed me something I couldn't explain. My lock screen had changed. It was the photo from the cabin, the one of me standing outside. But now I was looking directly at the camera, and behind me, barely visible in the shadows, was a tall figure. No face, no features, just a shape, almost human, but not quite. I dropped the phone. It landed face down in the dirt, but I didn't pick it up. The whispers came back that night, louder, clearer. They weren't just sounds anymore, they were voices, my voice, repeating things I hadn't said out loud, twisting my own thoughts like the forest was trying to speak in my skin. I shouted, I screamed, I begged, but the only response was laughter, soft, echoing, like it was coming from inside the trees themselves. I tried everything, picked a direction, and walked for hours, climbed a ridge to try and get a better view. Every path circled back on itself. I ended up back at the same clearing 3 times, same rock, same snapped branch. Time lost meaning. I checked my watch once, and it was 2:14 p.m. An hour later, it still said 2:14 p.m. The sun didn't move. There were no stars at night, just that same grey sky, as if the forest existed outside of time. The figure, whatever it was, never showed itself fully. But I felt it. It would stand just beyond where the light could reach. I'd turn my head and catch it shifting behind a tree, tall and still, like it didn't need to move to get closer. It just did. And every night, it got a little closer. I started whispering to myself, just to break the silence. Not because I needed to talk, but because I was scared of what I might hear if I didn't. On the fourth night, at least I think it was the fourth, I gave up trying to leave. I was exhausted, starving, and every time I tried to move forward, the forest pulled me right back. So I went back to the cabin. It was the only thing that stayed in the same place. I figured if I was going to die out here, I didn't want it to be alone in the dirt. But it wasn't just hopelessness that brought me back. Something else had shifted. The air inside the forest was different now, colder, thicker. I started hearing two sets of footsteps when I walked, started catching glimpses of myself from behind trees, not reflections, not shadows, me, just wrong. That night, I didn't light a fire. I sat in the dark, my back against the wall, clutching that old journal like it was a lifeline. The entries had started to make more sense, or maybe I had just gone far enough off the edge that they felt like they made sense. One line kept repeating in my head: "It wears your fear first, then your face." I don't know what time it was when it came to the door. There was no knock, just a long, slow creak as the wood bent under something heavy. I didn't look up right away. I couldn't, but then it spoke, and the sound of its voice broke something in me. Because it was my voice, not similar, identical, same rhythm, same breath, only it wasn't speaking like me, it wasn't telling a story, it was remembering it. Word for word, it started repeating everything I had said out loud since I got here. Every frightened whisper, every scream, every time I begged to go home. It echoed them back to me, like it was proud, like it was wearing me like a mask. I curled tighter, eyes shut, heart pounding, like it wanted to break out of my chest. The voice kept getting closer. It didn't move like a person. There were no footsteps. It just was, closer with every word. Then it said something I'd never said. "You don't belong anywhere. Not here. Not out there. But I do." That's when I finally looked up. I wish I hadn't. What stood in the doorway looked like me, but not. Its eyes were empty. Its skin was pale, stretched too thin, like it was trying to hold something back underneath. And it smiled, not with kindness, but like it knew something I didn't, like it had won. I blacked out, not from pain, not from fear, from something deeper, like my mind couldn't take it anymore. And when I woke up, I wasn't in the cabin anymore. I was outside, alone. When I came to, the woods were silent again. But not the same kind of silence as before. This time, it felt hollow, like something important had been taken, and the forest was waiting to see if I'd notice. I staggered to my feet. My body felt heavier, like I'd aged overnight. My head was pounding, but my memories were sharp, too sharp. Everything that had happened in that cabin, every word the thing said, echoed through me like it was still speaking. I walked, aimlessly at first, not even looking for a way out. I just needed to move, needed to feel something other than the weight in my chest. Then I saw them. More trees, more carvings, dozens of them, hundreds. The same eye symbol, some fresh, some worn down by years, and beneath some of them, names, carved by hand. A different name under each one, except one. One tree had my name, and the bark beneath it wasn't dry. It was bleeding. That's when it clicked. This place didn't trap people by accident. It collected them, pulled in the lonely, the broken, the forgotten. It didn't chase them. It waited for them to come willingly, like I did, like so many others had. The forest didn't kill you. It replaced you. That thing in the cabin? That was what's left behind after the woods are done with you. A copy, a shell that walks back into the world wearing your face. And I started to wonder if it had already happened, if I was still me, or just the latest version of something else. I don't know what pushed me to move again. Maybe it was instinct, or just the raw terror of standing still. But something inside me whispered that if I stayed too long, I'd forget who I was completely. Maybe I already had. Still, I started walking. Not toward anything, just away. Away from the carvings. Away from the cabin. Away from me. The trees blurred together as I moved. The air buzzed like static. The forest wasn't just watching anymore, it was trying to convince me I'd never existed outside of it. I saw flashes in the corner of my eyes. People, places, memories, my apartment, my dog, my mother's voice, all warped, distant, like old VHS tapes left in the sun too long. I shouted my own name into the trees, again and again, just to hear it, just to prove I still remembered who I was. But every time I said it, the voice sounded less like mine. Then I heard footsteps behind me, not one set, many, surrounding me, closing in. I didn't stop. I couldn't. My legs burned. My lungs felt shredded. But the forest had changed. The trees were further apart now. The air was thinner. For the first time in days, I saw real sunlight breaking through the branches, warm, golden. And then, just like that, I stumbled out, onto pavement. It was a road, an actual road. I collapsed in the middle of it, sobbing, not sure if it was from relief or fear. A car came hours later, or maybe minutes. I don't know. A man rolled down his window and asked if I was okay. I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know if the words would be mine. He asked me again, and I nodded. Just nodded, because that's what someone normal would do, right? He drove me to the nearest town. I told the police a bear attacked my campsite. I kept the rest to myself. No one would have believed it anyway. And yet even now, days later, I'm still not sure I made it out. I check mirrors more often now. I stare at my reflection, studying it like it's a stranger, waiting for it to blink out of sync, or smile when I'm not. Because maybe I didn't escape. Maybe I'm what the forest let go, so it could come back with me. If you're still here, and the forest hasn't come for you, hit the like button, share this with someone who thinks they're brave enough, and whatever you do, don't go looking for that forest.